Good morning. My name's Charlotte Davis. I'm York based. I work with sound therapy, and I also work with associated holistic therapies to get people to the stage in which they can learn efficiently. And what I'd like to go through is why somatic sound therapy is so crucial to the process of motor sensory integration and how motor sensory integration works anyway. So I work in a very small social enterprise called Fit to Learn. We are really at the cutting edge of how humans develop holistically to get to the point where they can operate calmly and use all their senses in an integrated manner. And this should be the cornerstone of every health and education system, but it's not, because Western philosophy of health and education has operated in silos. So people think about how vision works. In fact, they only think about very small parts of vision that they've specialized in. They think about how hearing works, but very small parts of it. They think about how small parts of the motor skill system work. What they're not looking at is how it all fits together as a holistic whole. Humans develop holistically, and therefore one system supports another. It's very hard to tell what's really wrong unless you stimulate every system. So it's really important. We're not medicating problem A when actually the problem is B, C, D, and E. We get them sorted out, A actually resolves itself. Therefore, as an organisation, Fit to Learn has a methodology, and our methodology is really in 3 dimensions, but we flattened it here for you for 2 dimensions. But whatever we're starting with, it starts with primitive reflexes. We've got to get the reflexes sorted in order to get higher skills working. We also tend to start with sound therapy because that oils the whole system, because it's agitating the inner ear and the vestibular system. So whatever we're doing, we can move much more easily if we combine whatever we're up to with sound therapy, which is how somatic sound therapy ends up being at the center of all we're doing. Our big argument is that humans develop over the first 7 years of life to the point where they have motor sensory integration. Humans are born helpless. We are intelligent animals, and we are designed to support each other's development. We are not really doing that. And so we need to have a really good understanding of how motor skills works, how sound works, how vision works, how everything comes together, so the person, when they read for meaning, really can visualize. The idea that people can't is really not sensible. It's we haven't supported development. So our methodology is a simplified route map. It gives everybody who works with us an idea of where to go and what to do next. But it's simplified, and it's going to get more complicated as we move on. It enables us to work in a particular sequence because we know you can't sort out your gross motor skills if you haven't sorted out your primitive reflexes. We know you can't sort out your fine motor skills if you haven't sorted out your gross motor skills and your posture and your vision. So all of these things layer on top of each other. In modern education, we come to it as though the child is fully formed. They are not. They need to be supported, good development, as frankly to half the adult population, not more. And we all need to maintain good motor sensory integration for good health, for good cognition. So we need to work across all areas. We also need to double check and reinforce. So if I improve my sound processing, I will improve my vision. Doing exercise on all fronts makes the whole body work better. It's really obvious. Everybody really knows it. Whatever you're doing, you've got to be conscious of it. You actually have to do it in your brain. It's not good enough to just do things mechanically. You've got to actually really understand why you're doing what you're doing. Otherwise, you haven't really learned. Otherwise, the higher level learning can't happen. So it's really important. You know, children really know where their arms and legs are, and a lot don't. And people go through life not knowing where their arms and legs are. So everything has to happen in the brain eventually. You can do so much patterning, you can do so much rote learning, but if it doesn't happen in the brain, it's not happening. The person is not developing good intelligence. So our overall objective is to establish calm mastery of motor sensory integration, i.e. get everybody to the point where they can use all their senses and motor skills together coherently. If they really do have difficulties, and it's a minority who really do, then we at least need to be moving them forward on every single front we can. We're not leaving people to sit as cabbages in overheated care homes. They've got to have a plan of how they're going to keep going forwards all the time. The end product is calm behaviour and the ability to learn efficiently for life. And we have to go on learning for life, otherwise you're accelerating the onset of dementia. So remember, humans are very complex animals. We're born helpless, we have a definite kinetic chain of development, we're developing on many fronts at once. If we miss the early steps, it can impact on all sorts of areas. All systems are interconnected. So as a tomatis sound therapist, if I move the sound, it's going to affect globally. Moving the sound will also improve motor skills, it'll improve vision, it'll improve a lot of things. But if I work on all the other systems as well, I get synergies. So getting the motor skills to work better at the same time as getting the sound to work better, I find I get massive synergies. The person can function better. So all our therapists, and I mean every single one, needs to be trained in all areas of human development. The idea you can come in and you're going to do that little bit of therapy makes no sense. It really doesn't. Unless you've got a really very specific complex problem and you need really skilled people. We all need to be skilled across the whole board. So I said it gets more complicated. We want to get the body working, the motor skills. That's one of the first things we look at because we're doing primitive reflexes. We've got to get the nervous system working because we've got to unbundle people and get them functioning. So the nervous system, both the sympathetic and the parasympathetic systems, we need to get functioning. And if people are tightly in trauma, that's a problem. But sound therapy is great because it starts easing it out. I also need to look at breathing and heart rate, because if somebody's breathing isn't right, it can cause them to stay in a traumatized state. It can trigger them to go into a traumatized state. If the heart rate variance isn't coherent, that can be blocking their prefrontal lobes. I can't get the person to function. Obviously, as a sound therapist, I'm looking at sound processing, but because I'm working on sound, I'm working on the vestibular system in the inner ear, and that's going to affect me globally. That's going to affect balance, coordination, acceleration, deceleration. It affects the optic nerve. It's going to affect the range of sound I can work with and how I work with that sound. I also encourage people to get their eyes moving so that both eyes work together. So that both eyes, the central part of each eye, it's only 5% on each eye, can come together and stay together and focus and refocus, and focus on the board, and focus on the book, and focus on a tree, focus on the hand. We don't check that. We don't check children got both eyes working together. We don't check children are sending messages from eye to brain. We don't even check the cabinet. So we want vision and visual processing working. We want to check, are people doing things in their brains, using all their senses and motor skills? If not, how are they working things out? And what I often see is people tap, tap, tapping. There's a lot of tap, tap, tapping going on. And they're actually using touch and they're telling themselves yellow, yellow, red, red, orange, orange. They're not really seeing. The visual system isn't working very well. And the visual system is the ace card. When that works, my goodness, a human can do amazing things. Food and diet is an important part of cognition. So if The diet inflames the whole body. That puts out the breathing, it puts out the heart rate, it puts out the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. Nothing's working. We're screwing up our guts. If the diet is a good diet, varied, etc., then it's going to support the systems. Sleep is vital, but then all the other factors can interfere with sleep and block development. So we've got to get the whole thing working. And of course, exercise and play are important for all humans. You've got to relax, you've got to chill, you've got to get to the point where you're calm. Humans aren't designed to be hyper alert all the time. Also, we can't move families, an individual on, if we don't have family support. Humans don't operate in isolation. We entrain. Our heart rate beat will go into synchronicity with those people around us. We'll synchronize our breathing. We like to be in tune. When we meet people, we're looking for what have we got in common. We're always, oh, you like doing Rubik's Cube. Oh, you like playing puzzles. Oh, you like this musician. Oh, we're looking for things in common. We feel more secure with people we have things in common with. And that affects our whole body rhythms. It affects whether we feel safe. And that is important, because if a human feels neglected and unsafe, you can forget the rest of it. You can't get things working properly. The human keeps closing down. So everything is interconnected, is much more complex than our initial simple pattern, but we need a simple pattern to work with. And then as we hit barriers, we're thinking of all the rest of these things. What is it that's making the person block? What is it I need to move in order to get them to go to the next stage? It's not complex, it's kind of tedious. It's a checklist. You're constantly checking off, you're constantly looking and thinking. And you've got to look at the person. You're dealing with a highly complex network, and every person is a bit different. Triggers. There's at the moment in a lot of psychology, there's a lot of belief that trauma is causing all the problems. If we didn't have traumatized children, they would all be fantastic. It doesn't work that easily. Adverse childhood experiences can cause a child to close down. And when they do that, by reflex, they close their sound processing down. They'll tighten up their guts. They will close down their visual system, so they're only seeing in the central system. They aren't developing. They're in a fight, flight, freeze state, and it very much restricts their development, particularly cognitive development, because the body isn't sending good messages to the brain. It's just surviving. Conversely, far more people are affected by poor development because we do not have good support systems to promote good development. Because they're going to school at 4 or 5 with poor development, they don't know where they are in space. They might have flickering vision. They might have sound processing, which is missing 60, 70 decibels, so their speech is a bit slurred. And they're trying really hard to do schoolwork, which is age inappropriate. So we're flashing flashcards at children who are not skilled at focusing. Not one of them is. We are asking children to do a phonics system before they can hear the full range of the English language. It's actually quite stupid. So we're putting huge pressure onto children to look like they're good. And we're asking them to do things they can't possibly do, but we're not giving them the skills to do it. Going through year after year after year of poor motor sensory integration in an education system you can't access is traumatizing. Every day you're being failed, every day you fail, every day you cover up. If you're loud, you're going to start shouting and kicking off. If you're quiet, you're just going to sit there quietly and everyone will go, well, Charlotte's a bit quiet. Don't upset her. And it's fine. I've had people who are selective mutes who've had grades year after year for speaking. They've never spoken a word in school. We just put them through the system. But they are constantly struggling, and that can cause trauma. That, for me, is a much more common problem than the initial, oh, this child's been abused. But I have people coming to me saying, I must have been abused, I can't remember it. And, you know, my parents seem quite fine at the moment. It must have happened because I'm behaving in this manner, and this is only caused by childhood trauma. And the trauma is you're going into school too young, you're being asked to do things which are age inappropriate. We've got to support the whole sensory system to function such that people can remain calm, whatever. And we don't do that. So whatever you're doing, you've got to get the person to the point where all their actions and their senses are feeding efficiently to and from the brain. It's not good enough to do things mechanically. It is not good enough to memorize phonics and then go, oh, the person can decode, therefore they can read. They can't. They're not readers. They're decoders. And the skills need to be used and developed and integrated. That is real learning. So what should be happening at seven, is that the child is able to bring together good sound processing, good visual processing, good motor skills, which include eye tracking, and can read a book. And they can read that book, and as they read the book, they are like immersing themselves into a really exciting place when they are having fantastic adventure. And as they walk through the trees with Lucy, they feel the snow, they feel the trees brushing on their face, they are feeling cold. Mr. Tumnus comes and they're next to Lucy and they follow and they go off to tea and they are completely immersed. And I honestly don't think that's going to happen pre-7. And we are rushing children to being decoders such that a significant number of children never learn to integrate all their systems in order to be efficient readers. So when I say it has to happen in the brain, it has to happen in the brain for everything. So we have an exercise called squash frog, which is lying prone on the floor, putting a bit of pressure on your heels. And you're thinking, well, there's not a lot of thinking in that. Trust me, there's so much thinking, it takes us weeks to teach somebody to do this. First of all, they've got to get their body symmetrical. They've got to feel that body and shuffle it till they're symmetrical. Because often my clients have been nagged to death, we take photographs and show them what they're looking like, and then they can go back down and revise it, and eventually they can get to their body to the point where it's symmetrical. They might need help placing themselves, but eventually they'll get to the point where we've got symmetry along the spine. They've got to press their heels down towards the floor, and for many this is quite a difficult task. What that does, by pressing the heels to the floor, you're turning the thighs in their position to the hips. That turns the thighs to the right position with the hips. That stops the legs pressing down on the feet so the arches can rise. That process of the arches rising should be a normal process for a child between 4 and 7. We don't support it, we don't check it. As well as lying there, having got themselves symmetrical, they're going to lie there, they're going to think, what's their forehead touching? What's their hand touching? What's the other hand touching? Can they feel the floor all the way to their elbows? Can they feel their body? And they're going to very slowly think their way all the way down their body, thinking, what can I feel pressing against the floor? That is part of proprioception. That's part of getting to understand where their body is in space. In the same way as getting symmetrical is about getting to being in space. Then we're going to do times where we're going to be breathing rhythmically. And ultimately, I want them to be automatically breathing rhythmically through their nose to a count of 5. Slowly and rhythmically in and out. And I want them to think about breathing through their heart. And I want them to bring their breathing and their heart rate to coherent. So there's a lot of thinking going on. The brain has to really think about what it's controlling in terms of breathing, heart rate variance. Some children can't get to that stage unless we have a happy thought, likewise adults. So always having a positive thought to think about, as well as where the body is in space, the breathing, the heart rate, happy thought. So we can bring our body to coherent. So it might take you several weeks to teach somebody to be able to lie prone, to be able to lie there for 10 minutes in the right position, and to breathe rhythmically and to come to a coherent state. Once you've taught somebody how to do that, they can do that in any situation. So that strikes me as a really useful thing to teach people for life, to train people how to just lie prone and come to coherent. And it's very useful because it gets your whole body in the right place. But you have to think about it. Another thing I want to suggest to you that we need to think about is seeing pattern. We test children in Britain at 8, 9 years old in times tables. They can only bring their two eyes together and focus in the near range at the earliest at 7. If they're premature or twins, they're highly likely not to get that till about 8. At that point, they can start really seeing, sending messages to the brain to see pattern, to copy pattern, to see pattern and memorize it. And I'm talking of little patterns. Times table is a 10 by 10 pattern. So before we get to this stage, I want children to be able to really manipulate with their visual system pattern. And then when we get to a 10 by 10 square, we want to really look at the pattern of those tables so we can understand how those patterns recur anywhere in the number system. What we're actually doing to children is we're teaching them how to rote learn. 1, 2 is 2, 2, 2 is 4, etc., etc. That's useful if you're a parrot, but we are humans. And humans need to develop layers of cognition. We need to know where left and right are first. We need to spatially understand left and right to understand 2 dimensions. We need our 2 eyes to come together to understand 3 dimensions, and pattern requires 3 dimensions. You're seeing relevant from irrelevant. We need to be able to manipulate pattern. We need to be able to sequence, and that requires sound processing. All of those senses need to come together so we can see complex pattern. If we don't do that, then at a higher level, we are going to struggle. And we might have lots of coping strategies that get us through to the qualifications, because an astonishingly large number of people have paper qualifications, and you look at them and go, how? Because they've used coping strategies, but they don't really understand what they're doing, and that is dangerous. So we really want people to be able to understand things in context. We want them to be able to understand child development in context. It's very complex, and that it is layered. So please, if you're in power, if you're a child, if you're a parent, let's see motor sensory integration being mastered by everybody, so everybody can understand things in context and everybody can understand the complexity of learning, and support children fully to be skilled learners, and support people in adult life to develop mastery of motor sensory integration and to maintain it, because it is a lot calmer doing that. Right, well, that's my party political broadcast. Please, let's make our children fit to learn. Let's get them to the point where they've got motor sensory integration, and poor development is not traumatizing our children. Poor development is not causing our adults to go into chronic anxiety. Poor development is not getting people into a state where they can't manage their lives. But we all get to good development, and that we can all understand what good development looks like. Thank you for listening. Hope you have a good day.